I know firsthand that obedience isn't always glamorous. It cost me comfort, control, and certainty because I went through a lot of trials from being obedient. The warfare was real from being obedient, but it also gave me clarity, it gave me purpose, and a front row seat to God's faithfulness. I realized then and there that God was asking me for complete submission and complete sacrifice. And I said yes. Remember, obedience is the new success, and your story is proof. Welcome to another episode of Called and Courageous. I am so excited that you guys are here today, and I'm super excited to introduce our guest. She is a woman of God. She is a wife. She is a mother. She is an entrepreneur, and she is a podcaster. Woo! You got a lot on your plate. Please welcome Elise Halcomb. Hi, Elise.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited.
Super excited that you're here as well. Is there anything that you would like to share in addition to what I've talked about?
Yeah, sure. So I do run a podcast. It's called the Peaceful Mompreneur, and I also coach women, specifically women who are running a business and also have little kids at home, right? And so this dual calling of motherhood and this vision that God gave you about your business and how to do both simultaneously without losing your mind, right? Because both require so much energy. And so we just work together and figure out like what that looks like in the season of life that you're in right now, because the world will tell you that there's a million things to do. But honestly, our capacity, it changes as our children's seasons change, right? So like when they're teeny tiny, you're exhausted because they're not sleeping through the night. And then they get older and they're toddlers and they need you all the time. Well, they always need you, I guess. But as the season change, your capacity changes and your schedule changes. And as moms and business owners, we have to lean into the season that we're in, that God has called us to right now, and just being very aware and intentional with our time. So, yeah.
I love that. Thank you for sharing that, Elise. And I would love to dive deeper into that. But I first want to learn a little bit about you. So, why don't you share with us your first encounter of being called to the Lord and walking in obedience in that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I semi grew up in church. Like I have like some people that are Christians and some people who are not in my family. And so we kind of went to church sometimes, but not always. And so I had some background, but not really. I didn't know anything until I was in high school. And my mom was taking us. It was one of the periods of time where we were going to church, right? And she took us to this church. Can't even remember the name of it, but I was in like their youth group. And I don't remember what he said. I don't remember anything about it. But I remember sitting there and being like, this is real. And thinking, okay, all right. And so there wasn't a big ordeal. Nobody called me to the front. No one prayed over me, nothing. I have no dramatic salvation story. But I was just like, okay, I was 14 and I said, all right, this is real. And so I remember even recently finding journals from that time frame where I was like, oh, look at me, I was reading the Bible. So I don't remember it, but I wrote it down. And so because there wasn't a lot of there weren't a lot of mentors around me, right? So I was just trying to figure it out. But I said, okay. And I was like, okay, Christians read their Bible. Let's read the Bible. So I did. And so just this like obedience walk with the Lord. And of course, there was lots of times that I fell because I didn't know really what I was doing. But eventually, and through some prayer, I found people in my life who really could help me learn to see what Christianity really was. And it actually wasn't until I got married. And so my husband did grow up in church. And so he had been a Christian for a long time, but you grow up, you decide you're going to be rebellious, like all those things. He joined the military. He didn't go to college, but young military men are basically in a frat, right? So that's the life we lived for a while. And we would go to church and then we wouldn't. Well, we always went, but we weren't living a great life, right? And so I asked the Lord one day, like, I need to do something. This is a long story. I need to do something. Like, what do you want me to do? And I wound up, which I should not have been able to do this, but I did. I started working at a homeless ministry or volunteering once a week, teaching a small group, which I was not qualified for, but that's okay. They took me. And I started praying for friends who knew the Lord, and it was very, very like middle school. Like I like basically sent this lady a text message. It was like, "Hey, I've been praying that the Lord would send me friends. Do you want to be friends?" And she said yes. So we were friends, and so it just kind of snowballed from there. I got a job I wasn't qualified for. A lot of my life is like I shouldn't have been able to do this, but the Lord opens doors, right? I got a job I wasn't qualified for as a graphic designer, and I had a photography degree. So I did have an art background, but not that specific one. And the guy wound up being like an associate pastor at a church, my boss. And he wound up being a mentor to me. And I just like also just decided to make his wife my friend. And we're still very, very close. And so like the two of them and my husband and me, we hang out all the time now. So like we live in different states, but we still drive back and forth to hang out. And so the Lord just put all these people in my life to be able to say, like, it's amazing to me how much He really cares. All I really had to do was ask, right? I need friends, help me. I need to know where to go, help me. And so like, and He did. So like that I do live my life like that. I'm like, if I don't get something, it's not because I didn't ask for it, it's because it wasn't good for me. And so I'm not afraid to ask for stuff. That's for sure.
That's good. I like that you said that because sometimes people say, well, God just didn't answer my prayers, and they blame it on God, not realizing that God might be protecting you. So I love that story. So, how did you know that you were called to help mothers and, yeah, that
Yeah.
balance?
Yeah. So that happened basically after I became a mom. So I already ran a business before. So I got that job as a graphic designer that I wasn't qualified for, but I fell in love with graphic design, and I wound up becoming a freelance designer and then a virtual assistant, like a marketing creative designer for other businesses, and I loved it. And then I got pregnant, which was cool, which was great. And I had my son, and I'm like, okay, finding clients is hard. I don't have the time for this, so I wound up working as a in a I'm sorry, an agency. And while I was doing that, I was just working out what it looked like to do both motherhood, which I was not a young mom. By no means am I old, but like I was in my 30s. Like I was set in my ways, right? Like we was yeah. So I was just trying to figure it out and was like working through what that looked like to do both and to do both well, because I knew the Lord had called me to stay home and I was going to take that calling seriously. But He also did not tell me to leave my business. So I was like, all right, we got to make both work. And so as I was working this out in my own self, I realized that He was teaching me all of these ways, like these systems, these rhythms that work in my life, and that I would have conversations with other people around me and start helping them without even realizing. And I was just talking to them about stuff. And as I was working through that, I realized like this is where the Lord has called me to, right? Like He has shown me how to do this. And a lot of it comes down to like setting boundaries and intentionality and like being serious about the things that God has called you to. And so He taught me that a lot when my son was very little. He's still young, but when he was really little. And so I was like, okay, this is what we're doing. This is the season of life that I'm in. These are the people that the Lord has placed around me. So let's do it. So we did. So we are.
Amazing. So help me understand this. So a young mom or a mother who has a young child and she hears the call of the Lord to do something that is going to change the trajectory of her life and of obviously her family's life. What would be, I feel like a lot of people are hesitant to do stuff and be obedient to the Lord because they're fearful of what's to come, or they feel like they don't have the capacity, right, to be able to do it. Um, so we're first called to our family, right? That's our first ministry. So what would be like your words of advice to that person who has to make that decision and is like on the fence?
Yeah, absolutely. So if you know that God is calling you to this, right, and He is not calling you to something that is going to have to sacrifice your family, like you said, that is our first calling here on earth. It is to our family. And then if He also called you to business, then my advice to you would be to take a step back and to look at what you are currently doing. right? Because I can guarantee you, I have never met one person ever that has not been doing something they shouldn't have been doing, right? Like we all have something we can cut out. And that may not be something on your calendar. That might be the amount of scrolling that you do or the amount of television that you watch. Like, it's just the way it is. Like your calendar reflects what's important to you. So my advice for you is to take a step back and very like look critically at what you're actually doing, because the things that you say are important are what show up. And so if this is something that God has called you to, then it's time to start putting up the systems and the boundaries to make that happen, because it is possible. Now, it may not happen as fast as you want it to, and it may not happen the way that you want it to, but you can do what God has called you to if you set yourself up for success. And that really comes down to being intentional with your time. There are things that you can get rid of, because God didn't call you to sacrifice your family, but he may be calling you to sacrifice something else.
That's good. Tell us like your experience. What were obviously you had to go through this in order to teach this. So what were some stumbling blocks that you had to learn and grow through?
Yeah.
All right, before we dive back in, I want to pause for just a moment and speak to the author in you. That book on your heart isn't just an idea, it's an assignment. God didn't give you that story, that message, that testimony for it to stay locked inside of you. Someone is waiting for your obedience and your words. I'm here to walk with you step by step to bring it from vision to published reality. So don't wait for the perfect time, because the time is now. Let's be obedient together. Visit the one and only publishing.com and let's write your book. Now let's get back to the conversation. Can you give us some examples?
Absolutely. So I'm always up for the adventure. I'm always up for whatever it is. I'm your girl. You want to go on a road trip? Like, we'll do whatever it is. But the thing is, like, if you're gonna do both well, and I'm not saying you can't ever do that, right? Like, I do still do things like that, but I make my decisions less out of emotion and more out of like, a logical way, because I am a gypsy at heart, and I make a joke that I cannot commit to anything except for Jesus and my husband, and recently my son has been grandfathered in, but that's it. I can't be committing to nothing else. And so I just want to run, and so that has always been a struggle. So like the idea of setting up rhythms or routines or being like constrained by this thing that tells me what to do, like, I did not like the idea of it. But here's the thing. It isn't prison, because I thought it was going to be prison. It's not. It is such freedom to know that you aren't using all of your mental energy on deciding what's next, right? You've already decided those things. So you can live fully present with your family, with your children. And when you're working, you are focused on that because you already know all the other things are taken care of. So that was really hard for me to say, like, okay, I'm not going to live by, like whatever that saying is, just like fly by the seat of my pants. That's what they say. And just do whatever I feel like when I feel like it. So now I have a system. I have a weekly, like an ideal week that I have. Doesn't always happen. And so I know when I'm working, I know when I'm doing other things. We have a mini farm, so I have all kinds of stuff going on here. And and often I get invited to stuff. And sometimes I say no, and sometimes I say yes, but I have made that decision, and I can look at it, and I am not regretting the decisions that I'm making after I make them, because I made them with intentionality. So that was a big struggle for me, for sure, is just being willing to like make some rhythms in my life. Let's see. I'm trying to think on the fly what other problems I had. I know I had a million problems. I'm struggling to think of them at the moment.
I remember when I first started my company, and I'm big on like be a woman of your word, and I used to say yes, and I love supporting my friends and stuff. But literally every time I would say yes, not only would I regret it, but when I was there, I wasn't there. Like I would be physically there, but I'll be like on my phone sending an email to a client, and it just became like nothing was working well, my business plus being there for my friends. And it took me, I had to choose. I didn't know how to balance. So it's kind of interesting that you're teaching people that balance.
Mhm.
So how has it been when it comes to being able to execute once you learn these things? Like, do you find that the Lord has been just walking you through it and convicting you, or how did you like figure out like, oh wait, this is not the right way, I should be doing it differently? Was it Holy?
So I think it was a lot of trial and error, right? Like we figured this thing out and then we realized it didn't work. And then there is definitely some conviction, but we also just kind of know, like what you were talking about, right? You said yes to all these things. And I agree with you. Like we say, as Christians, our yes is yes. Okay. So like I ain't backing out of something, even though I shouldn't have said yes to it, but because I'm going to be there. Learn from our mistakes, right? And so it's just being, I have lost my train of thought. I'm
Yeah,
very
that's okay.
Okay. Please ask me your question again.
I was just saying, was it Holy Spirit led? What, like, how?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay, so some of it definitely was, and but I also feel like the Lord gives us wisdom, right? And so like there's real conviction when you've done something like actually wrong, like oh, this was really really bad, like bad, but also like we can know just by the feelings in us, right? That the Lord was like just because you're not getting like knocked on the noggin by the Lord doesn't mean that you're not realizing it through, the way you're feeling, right? Like when you're talking about being there, but not really being there. And that seems to be a problem for a lot of women, just like regular moms, like all the moms. But definitely if you have a business, you're like, got another piece of your world that is like your brain is trying to go do.
Yeah.
And so, but yeah, I think it's definitely a mixture of like spirit led, definitely, because we have the Holy Spirit and He tells us things, but He also gives us wisdom and a brain, and we can make good decisions or bad decisions and live with those consequences. So, yeah.
Have you ever seen or experienced working with someone that maybe have like a family or like a responsibility within their home, and they feel like the Lord is calling them, but you may have some type of like understanding that maybe that person has been called, but maybe God is telling them not now? Like, has there ever been a situation where you hear that, where that discernment comes in? Because I feel like sometimes people are called, but timing is everything, right? Do
Yes.
you experience that a lot, or is that something that's really?
Now, I don't know if I experienced it a lot, but I definitely think that it happens. And I think that it does happen to a lot of people. And just because you were called, even if you're called to business right now, doesn't mean everything that you think that that the Lord is calling you to is for now. So I can give you a personal example for that. So like I know that the Lord has called me to this. I also know that He has told me years ago, before I even started this business, before I even knew what it was, that I was going to speak on stages, like physically in front of people, right? In the space. And I know that's coming, but I might be 75 when that happens. Like, I don't know where that is, but I know that the Lord is going to make it happen. So I'm not going to stress about it. And
Yeah.
so I can do what I can do right now. Right now, I have a little person who I stay home with. Our plan is to homeschool. Like, a lot of my time is taken up. So I can't just be flying off places to talk in person. And so if the Lord opens that door, I will take it with discernment, because there's lots of doors that open that are dumb, right? Don't go through everything that opens up. But like if it's going to be right, if the Holy Spirit leads me that way, then I will do it. But I would have to be very aware of my time to do so. So I'm saying if you're listening to this and you feel like the Lord is calling you to something, you can see this big grandiose vision, which is awesome, by the way. He'll lead you there, but your timeline is not His timeline. And the world will tell you a million things that you should be doing. And as Christians, if you're listening to this, I'm going to assume, you are probably only listening to people who are also Christian and giving you good advice in the business world. But if you're listening to 42 of them and they all have something else that the Lord gave them, you can't do all of that. So like calm down and just do what God has called you to right now. There's a million things to do. And the strategies, they're all probably pretty good. But what you need to do is lean into the Lord and ask him where he wants you to be right now. And that's not what everybody else is doing. That's what you're doing. So
I love that. I love that. You said something before we started recording about how obedience doesn't necessarily mean that you say yes to all the doors that open and everything. Do you think that the enemy does kind of try to steer you away from what God has called you to by opening up a door that makes sense? Like, have you experienced that yourself?
maybe, yeah, I could see that. Yeah, for sure. Because marketing is, I mean, like the devil uses anything that he can, right? He's evil. He's come to steal, kill, and destroy us. So even those people with good intentions that we're listening to, they're all selling something. That's just what it is. And just because it seems like a good idea and their marketing and their words are very good, that doesn't mean they're for you. And I could see that the enemy definitely using that and like convincing you that if I just bought this one more course or just this other coach or just this or just that, then it would work. But really, what you have done after you do it a couple of times, you've overwhelmed yourself with information and you haven't done anything. And so now you're in this paralyzed sense, like state that is hard to get out of. And so, yeah, I think that knowing discernment, knowing where you are, having people in your world that know you, love you, trust you, that you can talk to about things. Business friends, not just your random friend, like, because as much as your best friend loves you, she doesn't understand your business. And so having a business friend is important that you can run things by and through. Yeah, for sure.
I love that. I love that. What did you ever experience a situation where once you shifted in like starting this business and really focusing and balancing your life, what were the responses to the no's that you had to give to those people that you knew you needed to set those boundaries with?
Yeah. So thankfully, before there was like this interim period in between my graphic design stuff and this business I started, and before my son was born, I worked at a soup kitchen. That was another door that the Lord just opened and I was not qualified for, but I did it. And so I managed this soup kitchen. I just ran the day to day. And I learned a lot about boundaries by working here because, well, you can guess why, right? So and it was it was amazing, awesome, crazy season, right? So you never really knew what you're getting that day. But because of that, I was able to understand that everyone is not going to be happy with you when you say no, right? And that has to be okay with you internally. And if you go in with that mindset, it makes it a lot easier, right? Like you won't be surprised that people are upset with you. Especially if you're a yes person all the time, right? You're the go-to person to be, to help out. That's not great actually. But if you were that person and then now all of a sudden you're like, I'm going to be very intentional with my time, there will be people around you that are upset with you. And go in knowing that. And so I was able to learn a lot from working there and just knowing that people are going to be mad at me and that's fine. But here's the thing I also learned is that the more you do it, the people that are around you, the people that were in your life before and then continue to come into your life, they know that when you say yes, you mean it. And when you say no, you also mean it. And so they get to choose now if they're upset about it or not. And the thing is, it ain't about you. Because people with bad boundaries don't like your boundaries. And so you can't do everything. I heard it said, you can do everything. You just can't do it at the same time. So you have to decide what is most important. Every time you say yes to something, that is a no to something else because we only have so much capacity. And when you say no to something, you're also saying yes to whatever it is that the Lord is asking you to do right now. So the people in my life, like this is a good example. My sister, we live in different states. And so she'll call me sometime and I guess she doesn't look at the clock or something because she'll be like, oh, his name is Asher, my son. He said, is Asher asleep or in quiet time? And I'm like, yeah. And she's like, okay, well, I'll call you later, because she knows that I'm working. Like, I don't talk to people on the phone. And I answer because in case it's an emergency. But she knows, like, we're not having a conversation right now. I'm working. This is the only time I have. And so the more and more you do it, the skill that you are acquiring and getting better at, because everything is a skill. Like, you're not just good at running the day you decide you're going to run a marathon. You go out there and you do it every day and you keep doing it, and it's really hard and you hurt, and people probably think you're a crazy person, and like, that's okay, because you know what you want to do and you know where your goal is, right? So if you want to set better boundaries, you have to decide that you're going to do it, and then be okay with the pain that's going to come, and be okay with the fact that it's a skill and that you're going to have to learn, and that you're not going to like it, because nobody really likes it. I don't know anybody that likes it, but it's important.
I love that. Thank you so much for sharing that, Elise. So, if people wanted to get coaching from you, if they wanted to get more advice from you, how would they connect with you?
Yeah, so I have a ideal week, a rhythms guide. It's made for busy mompreneurs. So that is a first grade step. So it will walk you through doing an inventory of where you are right now and help you create that ideal week. And so I'd love to give that to your audience. And if you get into that, we will be connected.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Thank you for sharing your wisdom with us. It was definitely a blessing, especially a mother and an entrepreneur myself, but my son is older, so it was a little different, but still, it's a big deal, right? To balance family. So thank you for sharing that. I pray that everyone that has been listening, that they were blessed by this. And I want you all to always remember that obedience is the true measure of success, and your life is proof. Thank you.